This is about how to put together a sword for heavy combat in the Society for Creative Anachronism. I've been fighting for about 26, no, 24 years, and this is how I've learned how to do it. I've made a few of my own adaptations as I've gone along, and there are other ways to go about it, I'm sure, but this is what I've got for you. The first thing you need is a stick of rattan. Hopefully it's straight. We'll proceed with the given that it is, because straightening rattan is a tutorial in and of itself, and I won't do it here. The way I was taught as to the length you should cut it to is to take your stick and swing it loosely at your side, adjusting it up and down until it just scrapes the floor. Mark where your hand grips it and then cut off the excess, depending on the allowance you need for your hilt, if it has a tab or not. The finished thickness of your sword needs to be at least 1¼ inches, so just for the sake of certainty in this tutorial, make sure your rattan is at least 1¼ inches thick. If it starts out that way, great. If it's thicker than that, then you can shave it down with a plane. A planer machine, a utility knife if you've got nothing else, or with a draw knife. I picked up this habit from Jarl Skeggi here in Ontir. I usually take a knife to these areas where the sheathing sticks out to smooth out the lines of my sword. In Ontir, the edges of the tip need to be rounded off a little bit, so just take a file or a knife to it like I've done here. The grip is a matter of personal preference. It's very individual. There are arguments to be made for this shape or that, whether it has carved out divots for each finger, or if it's wasted like I do with mine, or if it's just straight. The bottom line is whatever finally works for you. However, there is one thing I'd like to point out. Being able to feel in your hand when your blade is on edge or flat is good to know. The next step is taping. Usually I use a filament/strapping tape, duct tape, and athletic tape. In Ontir, the rule is the entire surface forward of the guard shall be taped or otherwise covered in a manner that allows no rattan splinters to protrude. The way I was taught, and have rarely if ever heard of it otherwise, is to wrap it first with strapping tape and then with duct tape, and then finish it off so that there are contrasting markings that indicate the blade's edges. What I do is start at the guard area and wrap it up to the tip, and then wrap it back down again about 1/3 of the way, so that the area that is going to get the most wear is covered twice. Now to add the thrusting tip. Bear in mind that adding a thrusting tip should be taken into consideration when cutting the sword's length. It needs to be at least as wide as the sword's edge. It must have at least 3/4 inch of resilient material in front of the rigid tip of the weapon, providing at least 3/8 of an inch of progressively resistant give across the face of the thrusting tip. I grew up in the days before low-profile thrusting tips, so mine leaned toward being slightly larger than necessary. The foam I'm using is closed cell that has still plenty of life left in it and won't bottom out. For the outer portion of the tip, I took a leaf out of Sir Dublin O'Gwen's book and used a bicycle tire. I've seen people use leather, nylon ribbon, or hitchbell covers. The one in this video is leather and a rubberized strap I got from an old backpack. In this case, both materials are durable. I don't want it to rip off during a fight, and I'm taping it up in such a way that it neither folds over, nor is it so tight that it won't compress. Note that the weight you add with the thrusting tip and its materials is something else you might want to consider in the construction. The thrusting tip construction I use tends to make my swords a little tip heavy. Then I cover the blade in a layer of duct tape using 2 different colors so that the flats of the blade and the edges contrast. And then lastly, I'll use some athletic tape on my grip. Again, that's just a matter of personal preference. According to the rules in Ontir, you need a wrist strap or an equivalent restraint to keep the sword from flying off into who knows where and hitting some innocent bystander. What I've done for decades now is the equivalent restraint of attaching a loop or trigger for my first 2 or 3 fingers to fit into. Some fighters like a kind of ribbon that loops right around the wrist. Some like a trigger for the thumb and one just for the index finger together. The way I'm doing it here is, again, a matter of personal preference. I will say that a couple of benefits to the trigger type restraint is that it allows the sword to be kind of pulled along with your hand when you throw a shot, and that you can have a slightly looser grip at moments when it's preferable. Now for the hilt. Again, there's a variety you could use so long as they're legal in their construction. I've got a few I can choose from on hand. I've got a stainless steel cup hilt that I made from a pattern I adjusted a little from one Duke Montfort Kriegsschreiber and Sir Ludwig von Lemenhus designed. I've got an old hilt of pretty much the same design, but it's so beat up and clanky, I really don't feel comfortable using it for anything else except as a dead hand. The D-guard style is also an option, but I need to make a better gauntlet to use in conjunction with this. I don't have a wire basket hilt on hand, otherwise that would be an option I'd consider as well. With either metal hilt, you add some weight to the hand, so of course the balance does change. Hilts with tabs on them are pretty easy to attach and change out. So for this video, I'll use a molded plastic cup hilt that has such tabs. Hose clamps used to be the go-to method of attaching hilts that have tabs on them, and that was typically the day before hilts like the one shown here. But I found that with this kind of hilt, I'm pretty much good if I just tape it on. If it tears, I can just wrap it up again. If you do use a hose clamp or a bolt on a hilt with tabs, you should still cover it with some kind of tape so that if it breaks off, it won't fly off. And now with the hilt on, we have a sword ready to be inspected. And that's really important. Before you fight with it, take it to an authorized senior marshal in your area to make sure it's legal to play with. So that's what I have for you. And again, this is not the only way to make an SCA sword. Some people have other ways of making it. That's just fine if it works for them. The thing is, what works for you? You're going to have to try and find out for yourself as far as length of sword is concerned, as far as grip is concerned, as far as trigger is concerned, as far as pretty much everything. So long as construction is legal in your kingdom and you don't hurt anybody. And go out, have some fun.